The human war front was hell. One alien survivor tells their story part. One Crix Theta sat in the refugee camp, all 6 of their limbs shaking. The galactic historian across from them waited patiently, recording device humming softly. Outside, the tent, other survivors from countless worlds walked past, but none had a story quite like the one Crix Theta was about to tell. "You want to know about the humans," Crix Theta said, their voice rough from screaming that had lasted days after their escape. "Everyone thinks they know. They watch the news feeds, see the aftermath. But they weren't there. They didn't see what we saw." The historian leaned forward. Crix Theta's 4 eyes closed for a moment, remembering. It had started like every other conquest. The Zalathi Empire had been expanding for 3,000 years. They were good at it. Their warrior caste was bred for battle, trained from birth to fight and win. Their technology was superior to most species they encountered. Those who resisted were destroyed. Those who surrendered were absorbed. It was simple. It was clean. Earth appeared on their screens as just another primitive world. The humans had barely achieved faster-than-light travel 50 years ago. Their ships were slow and clumsy. They still used chemical rockets for most of their transportation. Their weapons were projectile-based, using controlled explosions to throw metal at each other. "How quaint." We laughed. Crix Theta admitted to the historian. "We actually laughed when we saw their military forces. They weren't even united. They had hundreds of different groups they called nations, all with different languages, different weapons, different strategies. We thought it would take 3 days to make them surrender. Maybe 5 if they were stubborn." The Zalathi fleet had arrived in force, 12 battle cruisers, 40 support vessels, and enough ground troops to occupy every major city. Crix Theta commanded the 3rd Division, responsible for securing what the humans called North America. They remembered standing on the bridge of their dropship, watching Earth grow larger through the viewport. "It was beautiful," Crix Theta said. "Blue oceans, green lands, white clouds. We'd seen prettier worlds, but something about Earth felt alive, vibrant. I should have known then. Any world that looked that alive, that fierce, would breed fierce creatures." The invasion began at dawn, Earth time. The Zalathi broadcast their demands in every human language: surrender or be destroyed. Some governments tried to negotiate. Others launched their primitive nuclear weapons, which the Zalathi shields absorbed without effort. Within 6 hours, every major military installation was destroyed from orbit. The dropships descended. Crix Theta's forces landed near a city called Chicago. The human military was waiting, but it didn't matter. Zalathi plasma weapons cut through their tanks like paper. Their bullets bounced off Zalathi armor. The professional soldiers fought bravely but died quickly. By sunset, Crix Theta's troops controlled the city center. "We thought we'd won," Crix Theta said, their mandibles clicking in what might have been bitter laughter. "We set up command posts, began broadcasting surrender terms. Some humans came forward, officials mostly trying to establish order. We thought they were submitting. But something was wrong. The city was too quiet. Millions of humans lived there, but the streets were empty. Zalathi patrols reported no resistance, but also no civilians. Where were they all? The first attack came at midnight. It wasn't soldiers. It was a group of humans who had worked at something called a hardware store. They had taken pipes, filled them with explosive materials made from fertilizer and cleaning products, and attacked a Zalathi checkpoint. 3 warriors died before the humans were killed. "We didn't understand," Crix Theta explained. "These weren't warriors. They had no training, no proper weapons. The translator said one was an accountant, another fixed vehicles. Why were they fighting?" The attacks increased over the next few days. Humans emerged from buildings thought cleared, throwing bottles filled with flaming liquid. Children ran up to Zalathi patrols and detonated improvised explosives. Old humans, barely able to walk, shot at them with hunting weapons from windows. Crix Theta had called for reinforcements to maintain order. The response from command was that every division was experiencing the same thing. All across Earth, civilians were attacking. Not organized resistance, just everyone. We tried to establish control through fear. Crix Theta continued. We executed those who attacked us publicly. It had worked on other worlds. The population would see the consequences and submit. But humans didn't submit. They got angry. The broadcasts of executions were interrupted by humans who had taken over communication centers. They showed images of the dead and called them heroes. They played music, strange, aggressive sounds with screaming vocals, and told others to remember the fallen and make them pay. A Zalathi supply convoy was ambushed on something called Interstate 90. The humans had removed sections of the road and replaced them with explosives. When the convoy stopped to investigate, humans attacked from both sides with stolen Zalathi weapons and their own primitive firearms. They lost 30 humans to kill 5 Zalathi. The humans considered this a victory. That's when I started to understand, Crix Theta said. Other species calculate survival. If resistance costs too much, they stop. Humans don't calculate that way. They have a word, spite. It means doing something harmful even if it hurts you too, just to hurt your enemy. Humans weaponized spite. The occupation of Chicago became a nightmare. Zalathi soldiers couldn't sleep. Humans would sneak into camps and kill warriors in their rest pods. They poisoned water supplies with industrial chemicals. They released toxic gas from chemical plants when wind patterns would blow it toward Zalathi positions. Crix Theta tried to adapt. They took human hostages, announcing that attacks would result in executions. The attacks increased. The humans said anyone who collaborated was a traitor anyway. They burned their own buildings rather than let the Zalathi use them. They destroyed their own infrastructure to deny resources. I captured one of them, Crix Theta remembered. A female, perhaps 30 Earth years old. She had killed 2 of my warriors with a weapon made from farming equipment. I asked her why she fought when she knew she would die. She smiled at me. Smiled. And she said, "My daughter is hiding with others. Every Zalathi I kill is one less that might find her. I die so she lives. And if she dies, someone else's children live. We all die eventually. At least this way, our death means something." The concept disturbed Crix Theta deeply. Zalathi warriors fought for glory and empire. Humans fought for ideas, for others, for tomorrow. They turned their entire existence into a weapon. By the end of the first week, Crix Theta's division controlled Chicago in name only. They held the center, but humans owned the rest. Every street was a battlefield. Every building was a potential trap. The humans had turned their own city into a maze of death, and they knew it better than any invader ever could. Command told us to be patient, Crix Theta said. They said humans would break eventually. Every species did. But I looked at the reports from other divisions, other cities. New York was in flames. The humans had set it on fire themselves rather than let us have it. Los Angeles was rigged, with so many explosives that Zalathi forces were afraid to move. In London, human children were being trained to carry bombs. The worst part was that humans seemed to be getting better at fighting. They learned from every encounter. They studied Zalathi tactics and adapted. They reverse-engineered captured weapons. They organized without central leadership, forming cells that operated independently but toward the same goal: make the invaders bleed. I watched them from our command post, Crix Theta said quietly. Humans going about their resistance like it was normal. They had jobs. This one made explosives. That one gathered intelligence. Another moved supplies. They created an entire economy of war in days. Workers who had built vehicles now built weapons. Teachers became strategists. Doctors learned to treat plasma burns. The breaking point for Crix Theta came when they discovered what the humans called a resistance school. Children, no more than 10 Earth years, were being taught how to make bombs, how to hide, how to attack and run. The instructor was an elderly human who had lived through something they called World War II. I asked him how he could teach children to die, Crix Theta said. He looked at me with eyes that had seen too much and said, "We're not teaching them to die. We're teaching them to make you die. There's a difference." That night, Crix Theta sent a message to Fleet Command. Earth was not like other worlds. Humans were not like other species. They recommended immediate withdrawal and orbital bombardment. Better to destroy the world than try to occupy it. The response was swift and harsh. The Zalathi Empire did not retreat. They would increase force until the humans broke. Every species broke eventually. Crixitheta looked at the historian. That's when I knew we had already lost. We just didn't know it yet. The human war front was hell. One alien survivor tells their story part. The second week of occupation was when Crixitheta truly understood fear. Not the clean fear of battle, where death comes quickly from a plasma bolt or explosion. This was different. This was the slow, grinding terror of never knowing when or how the humans would strike next. They stopped being predictable, Crixitheta told the historian, their voice dropping to barely a whisper. We thought we understood warfare. Rules of engagement, patterns, the humans threw it all away. They became something else, something that had no rules. It started with the night raids. Humans had better night vision than the Zalathi initially believed. Not as good as Zalathi sensors, but good enough. And they used the darkness like a weapon. They would cut power to entire districts, then attack in the black emptiness that followed. By the time Zalathi forces arrived, the humans had vanished into tunnels, sewers, and hidden passages they had built in their own cities. One night, Crixitheta's second in command, Volthmar, disappeared from his quarters. They found him 3 days later. The humans had taken him apart piece by piece, keeping him alive through most of it. They left him in front of the command post with a note. This one died screaming, like our children did when you bombed our schools. We didn't target their schools, Crixitheta explained to the historian. They were accidents. Collateral damage. But humans didn't care about our intentions. They cared about results, and the result was dead children, so they gave us dead warriors in return. The psychological warfare intensified. Humans hacked into Zalathi communication systems and played recordings on repeat. Not military communications or propaganda, but sounds. Children crying. Zalathi warriors begging for death. Something humans called music, but sounded like industrial equipment being tortured. They played it at volumes that made Zalathi ears bleed. Sleep became impossible. Every time warriors tried to rest, something would happen. An explosion in the distance. Scratching sounds on the walls. Whispers in the darkness that might be wind or might be humans preparing to attack. Zalathi warriors started making mistakes, shooting at shadows, attacking each other in panic. They knew our psychology, Crixitheta said. Somehow they had studied us, learned what frightened us. Zalathi warriors were trained to face death in battle. We weren't trained for the slow, creeping madness they created. The humans also learned Zalathi biology. They discovered that certain frequencies of sound caused Zalathi organs to resonate painfully. They built sonic weapons from speakers and amplifiers, hiding them in buildings and activating them when patrols passed. Warriors would collapse, their internal organs liquefying from the vibrations. Then came the gas attacks. Humans had signed treaties among themselves banning chemical weapons, but those treaties didn't apply to aliens. They released clouds of chlorine gas, mustard gas, and other horrors they had invented in their previous wars. Zalathi armor protected against projectiles and energy weapons, but it wasn't sealed against chemical attacks. I watched my warriors die choking on their own blood, Crixitheta said, all four eyes closing at the memory. The humans watched from safe distances through scopes. Some of them were recording. They wanted us to know they were watching. They wanted us to know they enjoyed it. But the worst part was how humans treated their own deaths. Crixitheta had seen many species fight. Most tried to preserve their lives, fighting carefully, retreating when overwhelmed. Humans did something different. They turned their deaths into weapons. A human resistance fighter was cornered in a building by 10 Zalathi warriors. Rather than surrender or try to escape, she detonated explosives she had strapped to her body, bringing down the entire structure. 40 Zalathi died. The humans called her a hero and named a street after her. We couldn't understand it, Crixitheta said. Death was supposed to be something to avoid. Humans celebrated it if it took enemies with them. They had a phrase, taking you with me. It became their battle cry. The resistance evolved. What had started as random attacks became coordinated warfare. Humans formed cells, small groups that operated independently but shared information. They developed communication methods the Zalathi couldn't crack, using codes based on human pop culture references, sports statistics, and religious texts that made no sense to outsiders. They also recruited everyone. Crix Theta's forces captured a resistance cell and discovered its members included a 60-year-old doctor, a teenage student, a pregnant woman, and a man with only one leg. They all fought. They all killed. Age, gender, physical condition, none of it mattered to human resistance. The pregnant woman was the worst, Crix Theta remembered. She had hidden a blade and her medical scans showed nothing because it was ceramic, invisible to our sensors. She killed 3 warriors during her medical examination before we stopped her. Her last words were, "My child will never be your slave." The humans turned everything into weapons. Vehicles became bombs. Buildings became traps. Even food became a weapon when they poisoned supply shipments meant for Zalathi forces. They mixed industrial chemicals into everything, creating toxic combinations that killed slowly and painfully. Crix Theta tried to adapt their tactics. They stopped accepting any supplies from Earth. They stopped entering buildings. They stopped taking prisoners. But it didn't matter. The humans adapted faster. They learned our patrol patterns and planted explosives in advance, Crix Theta explained. They learned our communication frequencies and jammed them at critical moments. They learned our supply schedules and attacked when we were most vulnerable. Every day they got better at killing us. The humans also did something unprecedented in Zalathi experience. They shared their knowledge freely, not just among themselves but globally. Every successful attack was documented, analyzed, and broadcast to other resistance groups. A technique developed in Chicago would be used in Tokyo within hours. A weapon designed in London would be manufactured in Sydney the next day. We were fighting one species that acted like billions of coordinated predators, Crix Theta said. Each human was individually weak, but together they were terrifying. Like insects that swarm, but intelligent, strategic, learning. The breaking point came during what should have been a simple patrol. Crix Theta was inspecting positions when they noticed something wrong. The streets were empty. Not unusual anymore, but this was different. Too quiet. Too still. Then the music started. From every building, every window, every hidden speaker the humans had placed, came the same song, something they called their anthem, but changed, distorted, mixed with the sounds of Zalathi dying. It was psychological torture, Crix Theta said, but also a signal. The moment the music started, attacks began everywhere, simultaneously, coordinated to the second, hundreds of resistance cells striking at once. Explosions rocked the city. Buildings collapsed. Toxic gas filled the streets. Humans emerged from everywhere. Sewers, basements, rooftops. Firing stolen weapons, throwing explosives, charging with improvised blades. They screamed as they fought, not in fear but in rage. I saw a human child, maybe 12 Earth years, run at a Zalathi tank, Crix Theta said. She was carrying a bag filled with explosives. The tank fired, vaporized her, but her momentum carried the bag forward. It detonated against the tank's armor. Didn't destroy it, but damaged the sensors, blinded it. Then adult humans swarmed it, found weak points, destroyed it from within. The battle lasted 18 hours. When it ended, the Zalathi had held their positions, but at terrible cost. 300 warriors dead, thousands of humans dead. But the humans considered it a victory because they had proven they could coordinate, could strike everywhere at once. That night I heard them, Crix Theta said, singing. In the ruins of their city, surrounded by death, they sang songs of defiance, songs of hope, songs that promised more death to come. They sang while they buried their dead and immediately began planning the next attack. Crix Theta had requested permission to use orbital bombardment on the city. Command refused. They wanted the infrastructure intact. They wanted the humans alive as slaves. They still believed the resistance would break. I knew then that Command didn't understand, Crix Theta told the historian. They were fighting the last war. The war where species surrendered when casualties got too high. Humans didn't work that way. Every death made them angrier. Every loss made them more determined. They were turning their entire species into a weapon, and we were helping them do it. The reports from other divisions were similar. Moscow was in ruins, but Russians fought from the rubble. Delhi had fallen, but Indians poisoned every water source before retreating. Cairo was taken, but Egyptians had rigged the ancient pyramids with explosives, threatening to destroy their own history rather than let aliens have it. Humans weaponized everything, Crix Theta said. Their history, their culture, their bodies, their deaths. Everything became a tool to make us bleed. And we bled. Oh, how we bled. The human war front was hell. One alien survivor tells their story part. 3 by the third week, the Zalathi High Command made a decision that would change everything. If humans wouldn't surrender their cities, those cities would be destroyed from orbit. It was meant to break human spirits. Instead, it unleashed something far worse. The first city they glassed was Denver. Crixitheta told the historian, their voice hollow. One moment it existed, the next it was molten glass and ash. 3 million humans died in seconds. We thought surely now they would surrender. Surely now they would understand they couldn't win. The human response came within hours. Not surrender. Not fear. Rage. Every human communication channel, every frequency, every network broadcast the same message. For Denver. Then they showed what they had been hiding. The humans hadn't just been fighting. They had been preparing. In hidden facilities around the world, humans had been building weapons. Not advanced weapons like the Zalathi possessed, but simple, brutal, effective ones. Nuclear missiles by the thousands. Kinetic kill vehicles made from tungsten rods. Chemical weapons that had been banned by their own laws. Biological horrors they had sworn never to create. They launched everything, Crixtheta said. Not at our ground forces, but at our fleet. Thousands of nuclear weapons, so many our point defenses couldn't stop them all. They didn't damage our ships much, our shields held. But they learned something. Each impact drained our shields a little, and they had so many more missiles than we had expected. But the real surprise was the volunteers. Humans had been converting civilian ships into weapons. Cargo vessels filled with nuclear devices. Passenger ships turned into kinetic rams. Mining ships loaded with radioactive waste. And they were all piloted by volunteers who knew they wouldn't survive. I watched the feeds from orbit, Crixtheta remembered. A human ship, barely holding together, accelerating toward one of our cruisers. We could hear their communications. The pilot was singing as he flew to his death. He hit our shields at significant fraction of light speed. The shields held, but the drain was enormous. More ships followed. Dozens. Hundreds. Each one piloted by humans who had volunteered to die if it meant hurting the Zalathi. Old humans who said they had lived long enough. Young humans who said they would rather die fighting than live as slaves. Parents who had lost children in the bombardments. The Zalathi fleet found itself under constant attack. Not dangerous attacks, their technology was too superior. But draining, exhausting. The humans called it death by 1,000 cuts. Each attack weakened them slightly. And the attacks never stopped. On the ground, things got worse. The destruction of Denver had shown humans that the Zalathi would show no mercy, so humans decided to show none either. They stopped taking prisoners. They stopped caring about collateral damage. They stopped pretending to be civilized. They released plagues, Crixtheta said, shuddering. Diseases they had engineered to target Zalathi biology. How they developed them so quickly, we never learned. Perhaps they had been preparing for alien contact longer than we knew. The diseases weren't always fatal, but they were horrible. Warriors would watch their scales rot off. Their eyes would bleed. Their organs would slowly fail. The humans also revealed they had been holding back. Elite military units that had been hidden emerged. These weren't civilians with improvised weapons. These were trained killers with equipment designed to fight the Zalathi. Power armor made from salvaged Zalathi technology. Weapons that fired depleted uranium rounds. Tactics developed by studying every Zalathi victory and defeat. They called them hellhounds, Crixitheta said. They painted their armor with images of Earth predators. They never spoke, only killed. They would appear, eliminate entire Zalathi patrols, and vanish. We found one of their bodies once. The human inside was more machine than flesh. They had replaced parts of themselves with technology to fight better. The war escalated beyond anything the Zalathi had experienced. Humans began using weapons that destroyed everything, including themselves. They detonated nuclear devices in their own cities to deny resources. They released nerve gas that killed humans and Zalathi alike. They poisoned entire ecosystems rather than let the Zalathi use them. Madrid was the worst, Crixtheta recalled. The humans knew we were using it as a supply hub, so they waited until we had concentrated forces there, then detonated a cobalt bomb. The radiation killed everything for hundreds of miles. Millions of humans died, but so did thousands of Zalathi. The humans counted it as a victory. The factory cities were even more terrifying. Humans had converted entire industrial zones into weapon production. Workers lived in the factories, never leaving, working until they died from exhaustion or industrial accidents. Children assembled ammunition. The elderly quality-checked explosives. Everyone contributed to the war effort. We captured one factory, Crixatheta said. Inside, we found 3 generations of a family working together. Grandmother, mother, and daughter, all building weapons. When we entered, they detonated the entire facility rather than let us take it. Their last words were, "For Earth." The humans also did something the Zalathi considered impossible. They put aside all their differences. Nations that had been enemies for centuries shared technology. Religions that had fought for millennia worked together. Every human conflict was forgotten in face of the alien threat. They shared everything, Crixatheta explained. Military secrets, nuclear technology, biological weapons research. Things they had guarded jealously from each other. They gave freely to fight us. A Chinese general commanded American troops. Russian scientists worked with European engineers. African strategists planned operations in South America. They became one people with one goal. The Zalathi tried to adapt. They increased orbital bombardments. More cities turned to glass. Tokyo, London, Cairo, Mumbai, all destroyed. Hundreds of millions of humans died. But for each city destroyed, the human resistance grew stronger. They had moved their production underground, into mountains, under the oceans. They had expected this. We found plans later, Crixatheta said. Humans had been planning for alien invasion since they developed atomic weapons. They called it paranoia, but they prepared anyway. Hidden bunkers, secret facilities, contingency plans for the end of the world. They were ready for us in ways we never expected. The space attacks intensified. Humans launched anything that could reach orbit. Old satellites were turned into kinetic weapons. The space station was rigged with nuclear devices and flown at the Zalathi fleet. Even their moon base, a research facility, was converted into a mass driver that launched rocks at Zalathi ships. They turned their entire solar system into a weapon, Crixatheta said. Asteroid miners changed course to ram our ships. Mars colonists launched supply pods filled with explosives. They even sent a probe toward our home world with a message, "We will follow you home." On Earth, the fighting reached new levels of horror. Humans began using weapons that violated every concept of warfare. They raised the dead, rigging corpses with explosives. They used their own children as bait. Knowing the Zalathi would try to capture them, they burned their own wounded rather than let them be taken for interrogation. I saw a human soldier wounded, missing both legs, Crixatheta recalled. He was crawling toward our position with a knife in his teeth and grenades on his belt. He couldn't walk, could barely move, but he was still trying to kill us. When we shot him, he smiled. His last words were worth it. The Zalathi Empire had never experienced total war. They had always fought limited conflicts where both sides wanted to preserve something. Infrastructure, population, resources. Humans didn't care. They would destroy everything rather than let the Zalathi have it. They had a phrase, Crixatheta said, "Scorched earth." It meant destroying everything useful as you retreat. But humans didn't retreat. They destroyed everything while advancing. They turned their own world into a hellscape to make it hell for us too. The worst part was the human will. No matter how many died, more took their place. No matter how hopeless it seemed, they kept fighting. Parents fought for children. Children fought for parents. Strangers fought for people they'd never met. They fought for ideas, for freedom, for the simple right to exist. We killed 100 humans for every Zalathi that died, Crixatheta said. They didn't care. They had billions more, and each death just made the survivors angrier, more determined, more willing to do anything to hurt us. By the end of the month, Earth was dying. Hundreds of cities were destroyed. The atmosphere was poisoned with radiation and chemical weapons. Billions were dead, but humans kept fighting. From the ruins, from underground, from the poisoned wastelands they had created, they kept fighting. That's when I understood the truth, Crixatheta told the historian. Humans would rather die as a species than live as slaves. They would turn their world into a lifeless rock before they let us have it. And they were winning because we wanted to conquer something. They just wanted us dead. The human war front was hell. One alien survivor tells their story part. The 4th week brought revelations that shattered everything the Zalathi thought they knew about humans. While Earth burned, something was happening in the outer colonies that the Empire had ignored. The humans on Mars, the Moon, and the asteroid belt had been busy. We thought they were cut off, Crixatheta explained to the historian. Small colonies, maybe a few million humans total, dependent on Earth for supplies. We were wrong. So terribly wrong. The first sign came when supply ships from the Zelathi homeworld started disappearing. Not destroyed in battle, just gone. Vanished between jump points. The Empire blamed spatial anomalies. Then a probe returned with footage. Humans had built ships. Not advanced ships, but functional ones. And they were hunting. They used mining vessels, Crix Theta said. Converted them into warships. Ugly things held together with welding and determination. But they worked. They would wait at jump points hidden among asteroids and attack supply ships when they were vulnerable during transition. But that wasn't the worst part. The Mars colony had been manufacturing something in secret. They had turned their entire terraforming project into a weapons program. The atmospheric processors designed to give Mars air had been converted to create toxic compounds. The mining equipment had been building mass drivers. The research stations had been developing bioweapons. They sent a message to our fleet, Crix Theta remembered. Earth may fall, but humanity continues. Then they started launching. Rocks. Simple rocks accelerated to incredible speeds. Our shields could stop them, but each impact drained power. And they launched thousands. On Earth, the resistance evolved again. Humans had learned Zelathi patrol patterns, communication methods, and tactics. They started predicting what the Zelathi would do before orders were given. Ambushes were set days in advance. Traps were placed where Zelathi would retreat. They studied us like we were animals, Crix Theta said. They learned our psychology, our instincts, our reactions. A human scientist captured our behavioral patterns and shared them globally. They knew what we would do before we did it. The humans also revealed they had been hiding their true military capabilities. Special forces units emerged from deep bunkers, soldiers enhanced with cybernetics and genetic modifications, warriors who had trained their entire lives for this moment. They weren't civilians with guns anymore. They were something else. I encountered one of their enhanced soldiers, Crix Theta said, all four eyes dilating with remembered fear. A woman, but not really human anymore. She had replaced her eyes with electronic ones that could see in every spectrum. Her bones were reinforced with metal. Her muscles were augmented with synthetic fibers. She killed 12 warriors before we stopped her, and as she died, she laughed and said others were coming. The space battles intensified. Human colonies had been building in secret for weeks. Ships made from salvaged parts and mining equipment. Weapons created from industrial tools. Crews of volunteers who knew they were flying to their deaths. But they had one advantage. They knew space better than the Zelathi realized. Humans had been in space for barely a century, Crix Theta explained. But they learned it like they learned everything else, completely. They knew every asteroid, every gravitational anomaly, every place to hide. They turned space itself into terrain for warfare. The Jupiter mining stations revealed their secret. They had been collecting helium-3 for fusion reactors, but they had also been building something else. Drone ships, thousands of them. Small, fast, and equipped with nuclear warheads. They couldn't destroy Zelathi ships, but they could swarm them, drain their shields, and exhaust their crews. The drones were controlled by artificial intelligences, Crix Theta said. Humans had created thinking machines whose only purpose was to kill Zelathi. They felt no fear, needed no rest, and learned from every engagement. Each wave of drones was smarter than the last. On Earth, the humans did something that broke Zelathi morale completely. They stopped hiding their children. Instead, children became active participants, not as soldiers, but as something worse. They would walk up to Zelathi patrols looking innocent and scared. When warriors lowered their guard, the children would detonate explosives or release toxins. We couldn't shoot children, Crix Theta said quietly. Even knowing the danger, most warriors hesitated. That hesitation killed them. The humans had turned their own offspring into weapons. What kind of species does that? The answer came from a captured human commander. When asked how they could use children in war, he responded, "You came to exterminate us. All of us, our children would die anyway. At least this way, their deaths mean something. They die as humans, not as victims." The factory systems had evolved too. Hidden underground and underwater, human production facilities worked continuously. They had developed ways to manufacture weapons from anything. Scrap metal became bullets, plastic became explosives. Even organic waste was converted into biological weapons. They called it total resource utilization, Crix Theta explained. Nothing was wasted. Dead bodies were processed for chemicals. Destroyed buildings became raw materials. Even the ash from our orbital bombardments was collected and used. They turned destruction into resources for more destruction. The coordination between human forces became supernatural. Without any central command structure, resistance cells across the world acted in perfect synchronization. Attacks would happen simultaneously on different continents. Strategies developed in one place appeared everywhere within hours. They used something called the Internet, Crix Theta said. A communication network we couldn't fully shut down because it was everywhere and nowhere. Quantum entangled communications that couldn't be intercepted. They shared everything instantly. Tactics, weapons designs, Zalathi weaknesses. Every human on Earth became part of a collective intelligence focused on one goal: killing us. The humans also revealed they had been in contact with their deep space missions. Ships sent to explore other star systems decades ago. They had been recalled and retrofitted as weapons, slower than light but carrying devastating payloads. They would arrive at Zalathi space eventually, maybe in years, maybe decades, but they would come. They planned for revenge that would take generations, Crix Theta said. They sent messages to colonies we didn't even know existed. Humans hiding in the Oort cloud, secret bases in the Kuiper belt. They told them to remember, to prepare, to never forget what the Zalathi did. The psychological warfare reached new extremes. Humans hacked Zalathi systems and played recordings from home. Messages from Zalathi families wondering why the war was taking so long. Children asking when their parents would return. Then the messages would cut to screaming Zalathi warriors being killed by humans. They wanted us to know our families would never see us again, Crix Theta explained. They wanted us to think about our loved ones while we died. It was cruel beyond measure, but effective. Warriors started refusing orders. Some deserted. Others simply stopped fighting with the same determination. The news from space got worse. Human colonies had started using relativistic weapons. Ships accelerated to near light speed and aimed at Zalathi positions. The energy released on impact was devastating. Our defensive stations in the outer system were destroyed one by one. They turned physics itself into a weapon, Crix Theta said. EMC-2. Such a simple equation, but they found so many ways to use it to kill. Antimatter bombs created in particle accelerators. Miniature black holes that destabilized, then exploded. Weapons that shouldn't exist from a species so primitive. The Empire made a terrible decision. If Earth wouldn't surrender, it would be completely destroyed. Not just the cities, but the entire planet. Crack it open, turn it into an asteroid field. Total planetary annihilation. The human response was immediate and terrifying. They broadcast a message to the entire galaxy. If Earth dies, we take the Zalathi Empire with us. We have seeded your worlds with weapons. We have sent ships to your colonies. We have infiltrated your systems. Kill our world and we kill yours. It should have been a bluff, Crix Theta said. How could they have reached our worlds already? But then reports came in. Explosions on Zalathi mining colonies. Computer viruses in our home systems. Diseases appearing on agricultural worlds. They had been planning this from the first day. While we invaded Earth, they invaded us in return. The fighting on Earth reached its peak. Humans launched their final offensive. Every survivor, every weapon, every resource thrown into one massive attack. Cities thought pacified erupted. Bunkers opened to release armies. The skies filled with everything that could fly and fight. It was madness, Crix Theta remembered. Humans charging Zalathi positions with nothing but knives. Children throwing rocks at tanks. Elderly humans in wheelchairs with bombs. They knew they couldn't win, but they attacked anyway. They wanted us to know that they would never, ever stop fighting. The human war front was hell. One alien survivor tells their story part. The end came not with surrender, but with the collapse of everything the Zalathi Empire had built over millennia. Crix Theta sat in the refugee camp, their voice barely audible as they recounted the final days. The Empire declared victory, Crix Theta said bitterly. Earth was broken. 60% of humanity was dead. The planet was barely habitable. We had won. That's what they told the Zalathi people. We had conquered Earth. But winning and conquering were different things. The Zalathi held ruins. They controlled wastelands. They occupied graveyards. And from those graves, humanity kept rising. The survivors didn't surrender. They adapted to the radiation. They learned to live underground. They continued to fight. We couldn't leave, Crix Theta explained. If we pulled our forces out, the humans would rebuild. They had shown that. So we had to maintain an occupation force on a poisoned world, fighting an enemy that wouldn't admit defeat. Every day cost us warriors, resources, morale. The real disaster came from the outer colonies. The humans there hadn't been idle. They had been building, learning, preparing. And they had done something the Zalathi thought impossible. They had reverse-engineered Zalathi technology completely. Not just weapons, but drives, shields, everything. A human fleet appeared at the edge of our system, Crixtheta said. Ugly ships cobbled together from salvage and determination. But they had our technology. Improved in some ways. Humans had always been good at taking things apart and making them better. They called it innovation. We called it terrifying. The human fleet didn't try to fight the Zalathi Navy directly. They knew they would lose. Instead, they did what humans did best. They fought dirty. They attacked supply lines. They destroyed communication relays. They seeded space with mines that would drift for years before hitting targets. But the worst part was what they did to other species in the Empire. The Zalathi had conquered hundreds of worlds, enslaved dozens of species. The humans sent them all the same message. The Zalathi can be beaten. We are proving it. Rise up, fight back, make them bleed. And they listened, Crixtheta said, eyes unfocused with memory. Species that had been enslaved for centuries suddenly rebelled. They had seen mighty Earth brought to near destruction, but still fighting. If humans could resist, so could they. Rebellions erupted across the Empire. The Zalathi military was stretched too thin. They were fighting humans on Earth, human colonies in space, and now rebellions on conquered worlds. Each uprising was small, but there were hundreds of them. And they all used human tactics. Asymmetric warfare, guerrilla resistance, total war. The humans shared everything, Crixtheta explained. Weapon designs, tactics, propaganda methods. They created what they called an open-source rebellion. Any species could access the information, learn to fight like humans fought, learn to die like humans died, learn to make their deaths count. The economic cost was staggering. The Zalathi Empire had always funded itself through conquest. Take a world, extract its resources, move to the next. But Earth gave nothing. It was a drain that consumed resources and gave only death in return. And now other worlds were doing the same. Our home world started experiencing shortages, Crixtheta said. Food, materials, energy. All going to support wars that weren't winning anything. Citizens who had supported the conquest started questioning it. Why were we fighting so hard for a poisoned world? Why were so many dying for so little gain? The human survivors on Earth knew about the Empire's troubles. They had intelligence networks that shouldn't have been possible for a broken species. They knew about every rebellion, every shortage, every problem, and they exploited them all. They sent messages to our home worlds, Crixtheta remembered. Your children are dying for nothing. Earth is already dead. We're just taking you with us. They included footage of Zalathi warriors being killed. Images of Earth's destroyed cities. They wanted our people to see what victory looked like. The Zalathi High Command made one last attempt to end it. They offered terms. Humans could have a section of Earth they could govern themselves. They just had to stop fighting. Stop the rebellions. Stop the attacks. The response was unanimous from every human faction. No, they wanted us gone, Crixtheta said. Not ruling part of Earth. Not controlling space. Gone. They would accept nothing less than complete Zalathi withdrawal from their system. And they would keep fighting until they got it or died trying. The Empire couldn't accept those terms. It would show weakness. Other species would demand the same. The entire structure would collapse. So the war continued, and continued, and continued. Every day more Zalathi died. Every day the Empire grew weaker. Then came the plague, Crixtheta said quietly. We never learned how the humans did it. A disease that targeted Zalathi specifically. It spread through our forces on Earth, then somehow reached our ships. Warriors brought it home. Within weeks it was on every Zalathi world. The disease wasn't always fatal, but it was debilitating. Warriors couldn't fight. Workers couldn't work. The Empire's economy, already strained, began to collapse. Worlds that had been part of the Empire for millennia declared independence. The military couldn't respond. The humans had broken us, Crixtheta admitted, not through military victory, but through exhaustion. They had made the cost of fighting them so high that we couldn't sustain it. They had turned victory into defeat. The final blow came from Earth itself. The humans revealed they had one last weapon. Deep in the planet's core, they had planted devices. Nuclear weapons of unimaginable power. If the Zalathi didn't leave, they would crack Earth like an egg. The debris would devastate the inner solar system, including Zalathi forces. They would destroy their own world rather than let us have it, Crix Theta said, and we believed them. After everything we had seen, we knew they would do it. They had already poisoned it, burned it, irradiated it. What was one more destruction? The Zalathi Empire withdrew, not just from Earth but from human space entirely. The cost was too high. The threat was too great. Humans had proven they would never stop fighting. Never stop killing, never surrender. As we left, they sent one final message, Crix Theta recalled. Remember us. Remember what happened here, and never come back. They included coordinates of every Zalathi world, every colony, every outpost. The meaning was clear. They knew where we lived, and they would remember. The empire collapsed within 2 solar cycles. The economy never recovered from the cost of the Earth War. The military was broken, diseased, demoralized. Conquered species rebelled successfully using human tactics. The Zalathi went from the dominant power in the galaxy to scattered survivors in less than a generation. And the humans? The historian asked. Crix's Theta's mandibles clicked in something that might have been bitter laughter. They survived. They always survive. They rebuilt their world. They expanded to the stars. They became the very thing we had feared, a species that could not be conquered, could not be stopped, could not be defeated. The humans established what they called the Terra Doctrine. Any species that attempted genocide against humanity would face the same fate as the Zalathi: complete destruction of their military, collapse of their empire, and eternal vigilance to ensure they never rose again. They didn't conquer worlds like we did, Crix Theta explained. They offered alliance or isolation, join them as equals or be left alone, but threaten them, and they would respond with the same terrible totality they had shown us. Several species tested them. None survived the experience. Crix's Theta looked directly at the historian. You asked me to tell you about the human warfront. I've told you it was hell, but that doesn't capture it. Hell is a human concept. They created it. They live in it. They thrive in it. When we brought war to Earth, we didn't bring hell to them. We entered hell, their hell, and we never escaped. The historian was quiet for a long moment. Do you think they would have accepted peace if you had offered it at the beginning? Crix Theta considered this. Perhaps. Humans are capable of great kindness. They care for their young and old. They create art and music. They love deeply. But we came as conquerors. We killed their children. We destroyed their cities. We triggered something primal in them, something that had evolved over millions of years. The will to survive at any cost. And now? The historian asked. What do you think of humans now? I fear them, Crix Theta said simply, but I also respect them. They showed us that there are worse things than death. They showed us that some species would rather cease to exist than surrender. They showed us the price of attempting genocide. Crix Theta stood slowly, all 6 limbs shaking with age and memory. My species conquered 1,000 worlds. We ruled for 3,000 years. We thought we were the apex of evolution. Warriors without equal. They moved toward the tent entrance, then paused. Humans broke us with a single world. One species on one planet brought down an empire. Not through superior technology. Not through greater numbers. But through will. Through spite. Through the absolute refusal to surrender. The old warrior looked back one last time. If your species ever encounters humans, remember this. They can be your greatest allies or your worst nightmare. They will share their technology, their knowledge, their friendship freely.